1 year ago, I finally went all in on my dream of becoming an artist. And pretty much immediately, everything started falling apart. I've spent the past 12 months making basically every mistake possible as I've tried to build up my ceramic furniture company, wasting time, burning myself out, and failing over and over again. So if you're looking to build a career as an artist or a creative, here are 5 lessons that I learned over the past year and 5 tips so that hopefully you can skip the mistakes that cost me months. Lesson 1. Quitting could be the best thing that you ever do. Everyone always says you should never quit and just keep pushing, but if you're making the same mistakes for months and months at a time, you just gotta quit. Let me tell you a little story about our stools. So my wife and I, Taylor, who I work on this company with, we've been trying to create a stool for the past year for our first ceramic furniture line. Every single one of them broke. This one cracked, this one cracked, this one cracked, and this one also cracked. It was pretty brutal, to be honest.
I really do wonder sometimes if all of this is worth it.
The best thing that we did in that situation was finally let go of that idea. Once we finally quit, we decided that we had to change something and we redesigned the stool. And the redesign ended up being way better than the initial stool. If we stuck with the stools that we worked with from the start, we would have had a cool stool, but we wouldn't have had the perfect stool. Failing could be the best thing that happens to you. Cheesy, but it's actually really true. So at this point, you're probably thinking this is the most generic advice ever, but hang on. I'm not telling you to just quit everything and fail at everything. That would be really freaking stupid. But what I am saying is that you need to start using your failure as data and start improving upon that data. It's a scientific process. The problem that my wife and I had is that we just kept making the same mistake without adjusting our approach, and this ended up costing us months. So if you don't want to do that, set a failure limit. I can't tell you if it's 3 times or 5 times, but set a limit for the amount of times that you're going to fail. If it's 3 times, first time could be a fluke, the second time could be a mistake, but the third time, if something goes wrong, you know you have to adjust your approach. Then figure out the root problem. Why is this thing failing? Make a list of all the things that could possibly go wrong and then go through the list individually. Don't try multiple things at once, then you won't figure out the root cause. For the stools, we tried different clay, we tried drying it upside down.
Very nice!
None of it worked, so then we moved to number 3. Do something different. You can always come back to the problem later if you've gained a little bit of knowledge. If you don't do this, you will waste time. Lots of it. Okay, great. So you're learning from failures, you're using it as data, but you know what's even better? Not making mistakes in the first place. Lesson 2, start with the constraints, design around them. Most people start a project the complete wrong way. Most people being me. When they first start something, they get super excited about the creative process and they just dive in and get all their creative juices flowing. And then halfway through the process, they realize that something fundamental just doesn't work and then they have to redo the whole thing. We have a couple of different sconces and lamps for our furniture line. We spent months, honestly, probably like a year, tweaking, designing, making a bunch of different batches of these lamps, only to realize at the end of this process, none of the electrical parts fit.
The parts are too big.
The wiring, the parts, the hardware, the way we diffuse the light, none of it worked. So we had to redo the entire thing. The mistake is we designed the art first and thought we'd figure out all the technical part later. So freaking annoying. Figure out the constraints first. Every project has fixed elements, right? Things that just cannot change. If you're a movie producer, you probably have a location and you have a budget. You're not gonna start writing a World War II drama with a freaking iPhone and $100 in your pocket. That would be stupid. Build around the constraints. Okay, so you have your fixed elements. Now you're gonna design around them. What's that quote? What is it? Here it is, maybe. Instead of fighting the constraints, just embrace them. It's a beautiful thing. Woo! It's really tempting to just dive into this creative part of the process because creating is fun, but you will waste a lot of time, so please don't do it. Even with the best planning, you're gonna run into another problem that's gonna be pretty tough to swallow. Lesson 3, just because you're exhausted doesn't mean you're working hard. Over the past year, I've worked harder than I've worked on anything in my entire life.
It just will not end.
I've pulled all-nighters. I've come so close to quitting that can't really think. I've just been really tired, okay? The truth is that a lot of that energy was a total waste. Being exhausted doesn't mean that you're making progress, and hard work doesn't equal success. I can't tell you how many times over the past year I have worked on a prototype where I've come in, stayed up really late, made one thing, something broke, and then I had to redo the whole process. If I had just been smart and the first time I made something, made a couple of them so that I had some backups, then I wouldn't have had to just repeatedly do the same thing and waste all this time. The sconces, right? We spent months working on these things and I just kept doing the same thing, but I hadn't thought things through. The same thing with the stool. So yes, I was working really long nights and I felt good about myself because I was freaking grinding, #grindset. I didn't have to do all of that hard work, but I'm an idiot. The first thing I'm going to tell you is purely mental. Get your mind right. You're going to want to quit a lot throughout this process. And if you don't tie your desire to become an artist to something deeper and more meaningful than you just wanting to make art, you are going to give up. Make your work sustainable. You have to figure out a way that you can do this repeatedly for a long time. If you're constantly on the verge of death, then you're not going to be able to think smart. And if you're not thinking smart, then you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And if you're making a lot of mistakes, then your name is Say a Hug and you're trying to run a ceramic furniture company.
Oh man.
Focus on what actually moves you forward. Every time you do something, ask yourself, is this really necessary and is it going to push me towards achieving that goal? Okay, so you're working smart and not hard and you're absolutely crushing it. Now you're ready to scale things up. But here is when things get tricky, because the bigger the project, the bigger the problem. I get it. I'm the first person to admit that making something big is really awesome. But the reality of the situation is that the bigger the project, the more ways it can go wrong. I've made plenty of prototypes that worked out really well when they were small, but then as soon as I scaled them up, issues began to arise. The sconces, great small, totally fine. As soon as I began scaling them, warping, cracking, all that good stuff. The stool, I don't even have to tell you about the stool. The more parts there are, the more tricky things get. And if you don't anticipate there being problems, then you are going to be in for a long, not so fun ride. Start small, but analyze. So if you're a painter and you want to make a massive painting, test it out on a smaller canvas first. See how the paint interacts with the paint. See how it dries. I have no idea about what painters do. The first time you scale something up, it'll probably fail. And as we discussed, failing is okay. Be ready to make your list of things that could go wrong. That's a callback. Huh? We're learning here. Just don't fall into the trap of it worked small, so it'll work big, okay? Because that just doesn't really happen. Lesson 5. The work you do outside of art is what allows you to be an artist. This is the hardest lesson that I've learned over the past year, but it's also the most important. If you actually want to turn this into a business where you pay your bills off making art, then you need to start wearing a million different hats. You need to figure out how to start an LLC, get your taxes right, get your finances in order, hire an accountant. There's all these things that you need to do that don't involve actually making art. Even on the art front, there are so many things that you have to figure out. When I first started, I thought I could just make a lamp, bring that lamp to an electrician, and he would figure out all the technical bits and the lighting and all that. That was a mistake.
He sent us a photo of the lamp, and it looks like ass. 3 months we've been waiting for these lamps, and now they're not done. They look like and now we just have to make a new lamp.
Ultimately, we had to learn everything ourselves anyway. The side table that we've been working on forced us to learn about wood and how to sand and stain and all these things that I didn't anticipate. And here's the most important part of all of this. How are you going to sell your art? If you don't get into social media and you don't want to learn about social media, don't become an artist. Nobody gives a singular about you. It's getting really aggressive. I'm sorry. Look, I get it, guys. I also hated social media. I didn't want to get into it. Please, guys, don't make the same mistake I did. I really wasted a lot of time thinking that I was going to be good enough to get discovered, and it just didn't happen. So get your finances right. If you can't pay your bills, you can't make art, and then your dreams die. Before you quit your job and just dive all into this thing, get a part-time job, do freelance work. If you have to keep your full-time job, then just work on the weekends, in the evenings, during the week. At least you'll have the stability to be able to rough it out for the next couple of years. Get serious about social media. You have to treat social media and marketing as a job because it is your job. Find creators that you like and just analyze their content. Go through videos that did really well, analyze it beat by beat. Okay, this reel has 8 shots. Each shot is is 0.1 seconds long. This shot is 0.2 seconds long. They're using this music. This is the hook that they're writing. The more specific that you get, the more you can replicate their work and the more likely you are to actually start growing on social media. Stop hoping that people are just going to discover you and start learning how to stand out by making people care about you. Accept the fact that all the work outside of art is the job. That's what allows you to keep living your dream. Every single one of these lessons I had to learn the hard way over the past year. I don't think it's possible to not make mistakes as you're trying to build up something, but I do think that if you apply some of the lessons that I learned, then you'll be a lot further ahead. You won't have to go through as much pain and you won't waste as much time as I did. Tell me some of the mistakes that you've made as you've become an artist. Please do subscribe because I'll be posting the whole journey of myself becoming an artist. Stay dirty.